energy. So I'll kick off and introduce who's here and what who the background of this submission is. As it says here on the page, this is a long-standing idea. This idea has been, or ideas similar to what we're going to talk to you about today, have been around for a while. And the nature of good ideas is that they persist generally because they continue to motivate people to do stuff like this and come and present to you. So introducing the people with me, Rex here, two over. Rex is the champion of this idea, and every initiative of substance, any serious one, does need such a person who has the energy to continue to bring it to the table and push it forward. So Rex is a Wairoa District resident. He's next chairman of this body here. And he was a key instigator in the Matahora Bridge project. And everybody who uses State Highway 2 going north knows very well how good that has been. So, and it's that background that makes Rex the champion. We have in the group of people that have put this together a number of subject experts. One of them is with us today. So Sandy Walker over on the other side there. Sandy's the I'm sure you know him. He's the secretary for the Road Transport Association. Area manager. My apologies, Sandy. And as such, he represents a big chunk of State Highways users in the trucking fraternity. There's other people not here today who are ex-highway managers for State Highway 2 running north to Wairoa. Civil engineers, current transport agency staff who we've consulted with just to try and make sure we're on the right track here. And then there's Katie here on the left and myself, and essentially we are affected citizens. Katie will be well known to you, General Manager of the Niman Bus Company, and as such her people and her fleet travel the highway north to Wairoa. If you have a chat with her after, she'll be able to talk you through what that means to them at a personal level, and how difficult that can be in terms of assigning staff that are able to face that challenge. I've got a farming business in the Southern Wairoa District. I was born and bred there. I'm very fond of the Wairoa District, and I generally go there on the weekends because that's where that business fits into my weekly plan. So we're a bunch that are regularly on this highway and familiar with it. This group has a history of looking to privately propose some highway alternative, and we have changed our thinking. That's not what we're here to do today. We are here to make a request that the Regional Land Transport Committee commence a process around considering the alternatives. So not that we have the answer, that we would like the answer to be sought. Essentially we want to see a start on searching for a better channel to the north. It's relevant and important to understand the history of why we are where we are today, because it does give some insight as to why a search for a better alternative would have merit and possibilities. The reality of the trip heading north of Napier up towards Wairoa and Gisborne is that the land up there was actually developed originally by seaboard access. And the top photo there is a steamer going out over the Wairoa Bar, and numerous ships were lost there, as there were at Mohaka Bar a bit further south, and the development of things as we know them today was very seaboard oriented, and there was also a walking and bridle track up the coast, and it was pretty torturous because the coast is pretty undulating and unfriendly. And that was the case through the 1800s, and in the very late 1800s, a coach road was formed. And the coach road, that photo, second one down, is the coaches crossing what's known as the double crossing at the bottom of Devil's Elbow. And that coach road did hug the coast because that's where the people were. That's why the road went where it went. It went far enough inland to avoid the tortuous geography at the coast, but only far enough to make it feasible. That was the state of development at the time. So that's how the coach road formed. And then in the late 20s, around about 1930 thereabouts, the railwaymen arrived, and things had moved on a bit, and they obviously had restrictions about what trains can and can't do, so they had to have a proper look. And the proper look found that rather than going over the hills, if you look far enough inland, you can go around the hills. And you can find a valley that leads you from Napier to Tūtera, rather than going over a range to get to the same place. So that history has led to two different channels of transport heading up north of Napier through to Tūtera. And those lines down the bottom of the page, you can't quite see Napier, but the green line shows the smart route that the railwaymen found, and the red line shows the route that the coachmen found. Now, bearing in mind, if you have to slow down to 25 kilometres an hour to go around a corner in a coach, that's no big deal. Not quite so much the case now. Whereas historically we've said, oh, it would be neat if the road could go up the railway line. We're not saying that. We're saying it would be really good if the powers that be could commence a review to say, is it really true that we should stick to the coach road and not look at fresh alternatives about how we access the north? We're going to go through some of the reasons why that should be considered. And at the end, if you wish to, we can put Google Earth up, and it is really easy to see the geography of the hill and the valley.
All right, so as Alistair alluded to, we're here with a different purpose. In the past, we've come with the answer, or what we thought was the answer, and we're now saying, well, actually, we're just going to ask you a question. And what we'd like is to see Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the Transport Committee specifically start the process, get to stage one, sow the seeds of the future of the connectivity for the north. And the reason we say this is that, Wairoa has always been isolated. And I know, being a part of the tourism process, I guess, we're featuring Wairoa more and more because there is so much going on, but isolation is the biggest part. And we know the risk, the road risk, and the road resilience is not great. And so what we are asking for is the commissioning and funding of a strategic business case review of highway corridor alternatives for State Highway 2 North. Now, we know that the business case comes through from NZTA, but to start the process is what we're asking for, to see if there is an alternative that we can then get to the next step. Rather than coming to you and saying we have the end solution and we know everything, we are saying that we understand that there are multiple reasons that things may not be able to work, be it geological, be it land ownership, whatever it might be, but to at least look at what those options are. And we're asking this for a combination of reasons. As I alluded to, risk management. And I'll touch on that more. Alice is going to touch on the environmental progress that we could be making, but also economic and social foresight, because we're looking to grow, we're looking to boom, and so much is changing. And I don't need to tell you, Charlie and Craig, that we have got so much going on in Wairoa, and it's changing by the day. I mean, kiwi fruit is being planted and growing in the Mohaka region, and that wasn't like that 10 years ago, and so we need to be preparing for that. So road resilience is really important, and I know this from my position running a bus company. the Devil's Elbow section specifically, technically described as a steep gradient, tight radius, down to 25 kilometres an hour, bend section of highway located in steep, geologically unstable terrain. It is also a main collector highway between major urban centres. But we also know how many road accidents in that particular area. And from my point of view, operating a bus company, there are probably 4 or 5 employees out of maybe 80 to 100 that I genuinely trust to go over that road with a coach load of students. And I have bus drivers that have said they personally need to be sedated to go over that road. And it tells you something, and the amount of logging trucks that have gone over the edge, it doesn't take much for that to be a coach load of students or anything else. And we are fully exposed, not just in terms of the road safety, but also the weather conditions or, our fault lines. So just to throw you back a couple of decades, Cyclone Bowler, a rain event that was not too dissimilar to what we had in November last year. It just so happened to be more centrally located in the Tutera Tongoio area and up Glengarry Way. But that wiped out that road for some time. And there is no alternative. The alternative is an extra 10-hour trip to go up to Murupara and then down through, Waikaremoana into Wairoa, or you're going all the way around the East Cape or going down the Waiwaka Gorge. The option is not the Gentle Annie as opposed to State Highway 5. And so we do need to be considering that too. But we're just proving that these events aren't 1 in 200 years. These events are 1 in 20 years, if not less than that. And so just to give you some context, 242 mils in 24 hours from November, which saw a lot of flooding obviously in the Napier City. Cyclone Bowler was 900 mils in 72 hours, more centrally located in those areas. But the Manawatu Gorge, I think we all need to really think about. That closed so many times due to slips, but indefinitely in 2017 because of heavy rainfall. And the alternative there is the Saddle Road and the Pahiatua track, because we did not address the alternative soon enough. And I know that there were things about land ownership and it was geological as well, but had we started looking at that far sooner, we would not have spent the last 4 years trying to fix and refix the Saddle Road, and we'll show you in a moment the cost implications and the carbon implications as well. But not to mention the earthquake risk that we have. 7.1 earthquake a couple of weeks ago, 90 kilometres depth up in the East Cape. 1931 earthquake was 7.8 at 20 kilometres depth, so we know that we get those here. And the Kaikoura Road was closed from 2016 to 2017 due to a 7.8 at 15 kilometres depth. So we are also not immune to that happening as well. And as I touched on with road safety, I mean, already we have issues with licensing in Wairoa, that's a different subject. But, are we expecting a 16-year-old girl with her newly minted licence to come down and visit family or friends or come back to school in Napier or Hastings over that road? Because they don't get licensed on that road, they don't get experience necessarily on that road. And likewise, operating a business, be it a coach company, bus company, or various different logging or trucking agencies, to operate over that road and know that they're carting, what they're carting, be it people or stock or anything else, are going to be safe. And like you say, Alistair, 25 kilometres round a corner is not bad if you're in a horse and cart, but it's very much different when you're at 600 horsepower, not 2 horsepower, which kind of brings us on to the animal welfare side of things. I mean, it goes without saying, really, doesn't it?
Essentially, in these days of animal welfare consciousness, it's worth consideration whether we think the road, State Highway 2 North, which leads people from Hawke's Bay to the Wairau A&P show and the Gisborne A&P show and vice versa, them to come down, and the livestock industry up and down the East Coast, if you were to contemplate a moment what the travel will be like for the cattle on the back of that truck or the girls' ponies on the back of those floats, it is just really a long, long way out of date and out of specification for what we consider to be a reasonable standard now. There are 25 kilometre speed recommendation corners on the Devil's Elbow. It's a regional highway. It would almost be the only one left in the country with that sort of characteristic. It's those corners are in steep incline roadwise and very steep geography, which leaves precious little options to resolve it. Right. Risk is one matter. That's the frighten factor. Do we have to move because in case something goes wrong? Well, that is an element. The environmental considerations are real for us all now. As a country, we're trying to move as fast as we can to get our environmental impact right. It's worth considering what that means from a roading point of view, and ask the question: what's the carbon footprint of a poorly conceived road? So we'll stroll through some of the environmental options there, and see where the future of environmental measures go here. So just some examples. When we lost the Manawatu Gorge, and this is from the Road Transport Association, this is Sandy's expertise applying, the difference in fuel consumption as trucks came through from Palmerston North through to Woodville was $28 per trip in fuel. That turns into litres of diesel, which turns into tonnes of carbon per annum. So that was a significant step back environmentally as we lost the Manawatu Gorge. The same calculations can be done without trying to predetermine what the solution might be, but to give a comparative illustration. The red line shows the actual contour elevation-wise of a truck travelling over the section from Eastdale to Tūtera via the Devil's Elbow. And the green line estimates it as it would travel up the railway line, because the railway boys are much better engineers. But the difference is significant. And if you were to take that and convert it into tonnes per annum, you'll see there, essentially, that would convert to quite a bit north of 2,000 tonnes of carbon per annum in reduction in carbon footprint. And if you consider the University of British Columbia, a study there estimated that taking a car off the road for a year is worth about 2 tonnes of carbon. That's 1,000 cars off the road per annum, just by giving the trucks a better route through there.
So if I'm going to stop you there for a moment, that 2,000 tonnes per annum,
Yes.
what volume or what numbers of trucks are we talking about?
So I believe I'll hand over to Sandy, but I believe it's based on current traffic volumes.
Right.
Yep. So that is just the current heavy transport volumes as they are today, which brings me to the pie charts below. Because as we all know, heavy transport volumes running on State Highway 2 North are growing, and their share of those two pie charts there show the freight volumes running north on State Highway 2 towards Wairua, south on State Highway 2 towards Waipukurau in green, and then west on State Highway 5 towards Taupo. And whereas the Wairua share of freight is maybe a little smaller at the moment, that balance is changing. And this road we're talking about, State Highway 2 running north, is becoming ever more important in terms of these environmental considerations, because the weight of truck transport there, the volume of it, and therefore the carbon footprint of it is growing. So that differential above is growing. So that's with the tools we use today, but of course these things are changing, and we need to address the question of, well, is roading where our environmental planning should be? And the answer, of course, is yes, because and the reason I would say that is because if we examine where big technology, particularly in the US, is focusing its development, its environmental development in transport terms, yeah, these photos are some of the answers. So there are now hydrogen rigs in the US on the road, putting out zero emission. The Tesla car in the middle photo, that's in New Zealand. That's not hard, that's here now. And Google are the people that are working on driverless cars. And I'm just not sure that Google really want to put, their cars into the devil's elbow challenge. They're dealing with decent road challenges. They're not really going to devil's elbow at this point. So we have to ask ourselves, in our planning, are we factoring in that the road transport technology is reducing its footprint rapidly? Are we also aligning our highway planning to that? And in this particular case, this road is now getting so out of kilter with what that future might look like. It's worth clarifying the opposition around rail, and that is that the investments in rail are happening. The regional council has invested in the rail link through to Wairoa, and that's happening, and that's good. And we're thoroughly supportive of it. What we do want to point out, though, is that notwithstanding that, these stats are from the Transport Agency and their projections that nationally 92% of freight is still travelling by road, and there's a whole host of reasons that remains stubbornly so, and wishing it different is not really going to change it per se. So it really remains the elephant in the room that if it's not running efficiently environmentally, then it is the massively largest component. So very little change in that through to 2052 as a New Zealand study prediction. The reasons there, a lot of freight is very short distance, which is hard for rail to compete with, so we can reasonably expect that's going to be a little bit persistent.
So I'm just going to jump in here because we talked a lot about the elephant in the room being the finance, and I'll answer the question before you ask it. But money shouldn't be the reason that we don't look at the alternatives. And I know that this more comes from after it's a business case and sort of a little bit more politically. But I know from my experience last year that the political parties are ready to put funding to it, but it just does not have a price tag on it because we haven't got it to the stage that it is a business case and that it's ready and it has a price tag to be funded. But what I can say and what you've seen in previous slides is that the RTA are behind it, and you saw the dollars value saving per trip, $13. If we were to use the Esk River Valley option, and that's if, and I'm not saying that that's the answer. That alone would be a $13 saving just from Napier to Tūtera. That would fund a toll road, and the RTA and all of its members have said that they would fund exclusively a toll road with that saving.
Can you just run that statistic by me again? Sorry.
Yep, so $13 per trip is the calculated saving. This is just one truck going over that road if it were to follow the Esk River Road. So we'd have to run the calculation again if there was another solution. Yep, but that's the stats we've got comparative to going over via Tongoio over the Devil's Elbow and the many hills that follow. So $13 saving. So in that there is money for every single truck going through to pay a toll and still have a saving. Yep.
Can I just ask a question just to go? So that's only on fuel only?
Yep, that is literally just fuel, not time.
Damage or...
Yep. Yeah, and wear and tear, tyres, everything else, yeah, exactly, and it's the easiest thing for us to calculate. And as well as that, the Northern East Coast community are behind it too, and I know this from my campaigning last year. Alistair knows it from talking to people. Rex knows it very well from his many years of being involved, and so, hopefully you've heard that from your community as well. The connectivity is cost saving and time saving enough. But I just think that if we ask the question, we would be surprised by the answer.
Yeah, so it's a scale of the opportunity thing, isn't it? That the truckies would shoulder a toll system by themselves and not expect any company on that. It just shows how keen they are. The last subject we want to canvass with you, and I think the most important one, is actually about the foresight and the opportunity associated with the provision of Hawke's Bay's future. In simple terms, we've got 3 branch routes connecting the hub here in Napier Hastings through to the rest of the province and the rest of the North Island. And we've got a lot of investment and quality rolling into State Highway rolling south and State Highway rolling west. But we don't see sufficient and proportional visionary thinking going around the north and the impact that has. Had hoped to have some stats for you, but would suggest that the share of the land area of Hawke's Bay, north of Napier, served by State Highway 2 going north, is really large compared with the quality of the highway that serves it. The share of the population up there, the people of Wairoa, the people of that whole district, and the people north of there in Gisborne, those people live in a circumstance that many of the rest of us would consider isolated. And a very big part of that is just purely and simply because of the quality of the highway that connects them in. And we'll talk about what the meaning of that is. And then there's the road freight thing. Ultimately, that portion of Hawke's Bay, that northern Hawke's Bay and east coast, has so much more in its future than what it is currently delivering, in a part because it's being choked by the highway. So it's about the share of capacity and capability that this highway does or does not deliver to the people of the north. And that converts through to a whole bunch of real and personal things for the people of the north. Education access. So we've got the girls of the Wairoa College netball team there. It's a well-known thing that that the teams from down here don't want to go to Wairoa to play. Or Waipukurau. And Waipukurau, by comparison, is a doddle.
It's easy.
Yeah. But, if it's tough to get to Waipukurau, then Wairoa hasn't got a snowball's chance, because that road is hell by comparison.
Exactly. Nice and people of Wairoa.
Self-moderate, will you?
The health access. Health access is a challenge in Wairoa. There's, and you guys may well be just as well informed as we are around this, but there's the centralisation of health technology and expertise here in Napier Hastings, and the access to that for the people, or the access by that expertise to that location is poor. There's a lot of money spent on flights and so on to overcome the situation. Cultural and social involvement. There's people in the room here who could speak to this a lot better than I could, but it's clear and obvious. If it's difficult, it gets constricted. Driver licensing is well canvassed, and the same happens too down in Central Hawke's Bay. If access to doing things properly is hard, that doesn't get done properly, and then we run foul of all the legal issues that follow. Technology uptake. We're looking to roll out the benefits of technology through the New Zealand community. You have to ask, does access difficulty choke that also for the north? And every other element that delivers isolation. There's it's a spectacular place up there. The climate and the geography and the scenic things are fantastic, but isolation reduces all of that opportunity coming into the future. And this rolls back to people, families, the in-group up there, urban development and opportunity. We've got a council in Wairoa that is working hard to try and make ends meet financially, and isolation doesn't help that task. Building a future that resolves all of that is against them, but with isolation. Right.
So we come to our last page, but hopefully we will, or we have inspired you enough to ask us some questions. But ultimately, like we said, there's risk, there's environmental impact, there's environmental opportunity, but most importantly, it's an opportunity for us to show foresight. And we've been, and I know because I've been watching it, Hawke's Bay has become so much more than Napier and Hastings. Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa have become real jewels in the crown, and if we continue to develop everywhere else except on the way up there, we will lose the opportunity to be part of that story. There's so much more that goes on even beyond Wairoa. Mahia is part of the Hawke's Bay region. I don't need to tell you all that. And what goes on in Gisborne and the East Cape, it's an untapped potential area. And that what is changing up there is so rapid. The produce that is coming from those areas, the way it moves. We touched on rail, but it's just not possible for rail because it's got to move so quickly. And, while rail can be helping in one aspect, whether it be logs or, there's ideas about barging logs, there's so many opportunities here, but we will never lose the need to be operating efficiently by road, and that is just freight, not talking about communities, opportunities. The digital work that you're doing in Wairoa alone is really proving that you can do anything from anywhere, but boy, does it make a difference if they have the learning ability to come back and come to Napier and experience, what's going on here. So we are asking that the Regional Transport Committee looks at starting the process for looking for opportunities for alternative corridors from Napier to Wairoa by way of pursuing a strategic business case study that will steer us in the right direction, include Wairoa in Hawke's Bay Regional Development. Because at the end of the day, we know that there will be better options if we care to look, and I know that in the past we have come saying to you that we know the answer. We know we don't necessarily. We know that there is far more to it, but we would love for somebody to look into it.
Yeah, utterly compelling, and thank you. You really described the vicious cycle that Wairoa, through its isolation, is dwindling in numbers and vitality, and it's therefore, it becomes, as I say, a vicious cycle. We were really struck as a committee when, I think it was Sonia Newton, the first hearing came and spoke to us, really impressing the sociological consequences of the issue you brought to our table. Committee members, do we have some questions?
If I could add one thing to that, there's always the downsides of things being wrong, but the flip side and the exciting part is the upside of things being made right.
Yeah.
Wairoa is a majestic place in terms of climate and scenery and coastal.
Give them another 10 minutes, yeah.
and
Deputy Chair?
They sound like politicians, don't they?
if the upside available, if we could just take the choke point off.
You unlock it so much.
Yeah.
I understand that. And, look, I had a couple of questions, and it's the relationship with rail. I wasn't quite clear whether you put squarely on the table, and realistically I think that you're talking about a business case to investigate the corridor.
Yeah.
One of the slides in your written submission talked about replacing rail with the road, or are you talking about there's the corridor, it could be both? What
Yeah, I think it comes with historical context of this project. Rex has been championing this for such a long time that, we have gone down, or he has gone down so many channels, looking at all the options, and certainly there was a lot of time spent saying, okay, maybe that should be a good option. And I think what we're coming to you today with is saying, actually, seeing as this has not gotten across the line up until, now hopefully, that perhaps that was the wrong way of going about it, and we're saying let's go back to step one, not trying to tell you this is step 10 and you can carry on from here.
So that could be figured out through the process.
Yeah, so hence why we've got quite a lot of data around that, and we see that as, hey, it works really well for rail, so maybe it does work well for road, but that we actually don't know. All we know is the current road just isn't working for everybody else.
Do you know if there's width within the corridor, Kiwi Rail land or otherwise, in terms of topography, for a road and a rail?
But the honest answer to that would be no. However, a couple of things. Sorry?
I do. A railway corridor is 33 metres wide, even though the farmers, because they have to maintain the weeds and all that, put it right up to the rail. So the answer to your first question is, yes, we see the opportunity of a combined road, rail and cycleway. And if you go back in history, as one of my friends worked on the project, in 1968-69, there was initial investigation into putting the state highway alongside the rail. because of the gradient and everything else, and the security of slipping and all that. And so that was done in 1968, 69. Unfortunately, when the Ministry of Works moved out of the Shakespeare Road office, it got lost.
Well, that's where my offices are, I'll keep a lookout.
Didn't either.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Kate, and to the others. I've had this presented as the big grand project, so I really appreciate you've come back and said actually it's about solving the problem. So I just want to understand the question.
Yep.
Are you asking us to essentially start a business case that's investigating Bayview to Tutera? You're not saying go up the rail corridor, you're just saying there's a problem, what's the solution? Okay, next question is, were you aware that the Waikari Gorge has a business case? Lovely,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, very aware, which is why we're quite positive that there's potential here. And again, why we're coming saying we don't know the answer.
Yeah.
We thought we might have known the answer, but that there's so many other things at play. And what wasn't in that slide, William's unfortunately not here, but he's from Opus and has been sort of part of our work that we've done. As he said, you know, be it a helicopter study, whatever you want to call it, just addressing the geological constraints, the land ownership constraints, and all the rest of it is that start before it gets to that next point. Yeah.
So swallow the elephant a little bit at a time.
Yeah, and equally don't, in a long-term planning process like you're doing now, don't allow such a long window to advance with making no start.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, hey, look, thanks for the presentation. I firstly acknowledge Rex, all the work you've done behind the scenes for many years. Much nicer listening to Alistair and Katie. And, Rex has had a few somethings on the table with us and that, and also really lovely to hear you promoting the Wairo like you did, because I try to do it around this table, but Martin shuts me down.
Yeah.
So it's been really good.
That's harsh.
But I think your savings on the $13, but that's only trucks only. There's
Yep.
also cars
Yes.
and everything else. So that's that's the thing we need to be pushing from. You know, it's actually the no-brainer for me is it's not going to be a cost.
Yep.
Because we're going to have those cost benefits in the savings. So I think, and Rex, I think in all fairness with the railway was closed when you used to talk about
That's
it. Then
Yes.
it's
That's right.
closed forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so that's where the confusion
Those
is.
are
Yeah.
historic slides. and
Yeah.
everything.
Correct.
So well done, great presentation, and I just hope that everyone around the table is really on board like I am, because it is exciting, and it's not only benefits Wairo, it actually benefits the rest of Hawke's Bay
Yeah.
too.
And
And
to-
Gisborne.
To add to that too, and thank you for your support, I've talked to quite a few people, especially in the Wairoa region, and Alan Newton, who's the president, chair of the Fed Farmers. I mean, I don't know whether this is a true statistic, but it's certainly his statistic. He feels that change, if it was to be that corridor, but any change could shave 40 minutes off of an hour and 40-minute trip.
And what that could do is, when I leave, so I'm 2 hours at a disadvantage when I come to meetings here. I have to read my minutes, so I have to read everything 2 hours
Thank you.
out. Where if I save 40 minutes, I could do it when I arrived here and be like all these other guys.
Exactly.
Don't you read and drive at the same time?
Well, we'll take this into deliberations, but it's yeah, we've got a Councillor Kerr.
Just a very simple question. Although what you have proposed in here is not the answer, I'm just interested, is that report the most current report, or is that a reiteration in those figures of the original report?
You mean the one in my submission?
Yes.
The original one? Those were done for this committee in 1915, and then again...
2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. So
You're not that old, Rick.
And then going forward to 2017 in the 10-year plan, and to me, I'm insulted, extremely insulted, and it was presented to this committee and it's been ignored. The key thing I want to say is security and access to Wairo. The next flood is when, when it's coming. And the next earthquake, when is it coming? We've had one in Kaikoura, Christchurch and up north. We've got the Hikurangi fault there. And the problem with Wairoa is, with the Hikurangi fault going under the Pacific Plate, it turns the water over. And the real worry for Wairoa is the same as for Napier. It's going to get flooded. So the thing that they're saying for the people of Wairoa, if you feel a good shake, for God's sake, get into the hills. Mm-hmm. And my worry is it will destroy the access down Devil's Elbow is so vulnerable. You're going to do Matahora Gorge was one. There's no alternative access. And how does people get to Wairoa to help those who are dying?
Tony, can I
That's
add
critical.
one relevance? That project that was done in 2015 that Rex refers to was done, in fairness, quite thoroughly by some private people, and they actually went up the railway line and they videoed it all and they did a whole lot of stuff. The importance of it to this conversation today and the proposal we're making to make a start is only really that it does shed light on the fact that there is options. We're not trying to send you on a wild goose chase. You know, talking to the manager of the Southern Network out of Wellington, who looks after the Rimatakas, there's no point in having that discussion down there. There's no other place to put that road. Maybe we're not in that position here. Yeah, and so it sheds some light on the probability that we have got alternatives. The railwayman found it, and so therefore it's not a fruitless idea to start the ball rolling.
And just, although it's not a question, a comment, what a beautiful trip, having had the pleasure of actually driving up the rail link all the way to Wairoa. It is a stunning trip through.
But that took 3 hours.
Because it's not a beautiful highway.
Yeah. Thanks, Alistair. Thanks,
All right,
Katie.
look, I think that brings today's hearings to a close, and what a highlight that was in terms of way to finish. So again, thank you, and it will not be forgotten.
Thank
Will
you
not be
very
over.
much.
I can assure you of that. We do have to have our deliberations. I'm going to close with our karakia kia tau. You're welcome to join me in it. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ātawhai o tō tātou ariki, a ihu karari, mei te araha o te atua, e whiwhi nā tahitanga ki te wairoa tāpu, aki. And safe travels.
You reach out the door. Yeah, pretty long day, right?
What have you done to yourself, Martin?
It's